Everyone, today I want to share a message of hope, encouragement, and purpose. No matter where you find yourself in life, I want you to know that God has more for you. You may feel stuck, weary, or uncertain about the future, but I believe there is a greater plan and a higher purpose awaiting you, over which we find ourselves overwhelmed by the unpredictability of life. We make plans, set goals, and build expectations, yet things don't always unfold the way we envision. Disappointment sets in, and we may start questioning our path or even our worth. However, it is essential to remember that while our human perspective is limited, God's view is limitless. He sees the beginning from the end and knows every intricate detail of our lives. His plans are far greater than anything we can imagine. In Jeremiah 29:11, God speaks through the prophet Jeremiah saying, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future." These words were spoken to the Israelites when they were in exile, displaced, discouraged, and uncertain about their future. Despite their difficult circumstances, God assured them that He had not abandoned them, that He had a greater purpose for their lives. Similarly, we may find ourselves in exile seasons of waiting, struggle, or uncertainty. We might feel as though our prayers go unheard or that our dreams are slipping away. Yet God's plans are still at work. He is not limited by our present circumstances, and His timing is perfect. We often desire immediate results and quick solutions, but God values the process of growth and development. He uses our challenges to build our character, increase our faith, and draw us closer to Him. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. As a young man, he received dreams of greatness, but instead of rising to power immediately, he faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. To anyone observing his life, it may have seemed like those dreams were shattered. But God was orchestrating every event to position Joseph exactly where he needed to be, as a leader in Egypt, saving nations from famine. Joseph's journey teaches us that even when our path seems to take unexpected detours, God's purpose for us remains in what appears to be a setback is often a setup for something greater. There are times when we hold tightly to our plans because we fear the unknown. We cling to what we think is best for us. Yet God calls us to surrender. Trusting in His plans means letting go of control and believing that His ways are higher than our ways. It means accepting that the closed doors we encounter are not rejections, but redirections towards something far better than we could plan for ourselves. If you have faced disappointment or unfulfilled expectations, remember that God's plans are still at work. The delay you experience may be a season of preparation. The hardship you endure may be refining your character. The waiting period may be a divine pause, ensuring that when the time comes, you are ready to receive what He has prepared for you. In moments of doubt, when our plans fail and our dreams seem distant, we can find comfort in knowing that God's plans for us are grounded in love, shaped by wisdom and anchored in purpose. They are not plans to harm us, but to give us hope and a future that goes beyond our wildest expectations. When we embrace this truth, we can live with confidence, knowing that no matter what happens, God has more for us. Our past often feels like a heavy weight we carry, mistakes we've made, regrets we hold, and memories that haunt us. It's easy to let these past experiences define our identity, convincing us that we're unworthy of more. We replay failures in our minds, wondering if they disqualify us from the life we hope for. However, one of the most powerful truths we can embrace is that our past does not determine our future. God's grace covers us completely, redeeming our brokenness and transforming our setbacks into testimonies. Throughout the Bible, we see God using people who had troubled pasts to accomplish incredible things. Moses had a past marked by impulsiveness. Yet God saw beyond his mistakes and called him to lead an entire nation out of slavery. David, known as a man after God's own heart, committed adultery and orchestrated a man's death. Yet he repented, and God used him mightily as a king and worshiper. Even Paul, who once persecuted Christians, became one of the greatest apostles, writing much of the New Testament. If God can use people with such flawed pasts to accomplish his will, surely he can work through us, despite our imperfection. The enemy often tries to use our past against us, whispering lies that we are unworthy or incapable of receiving more from God. We may feel that because of past choices or circumstances beyond our control, we are disqualified from the blessings God has prepared for us. But God specializes in redemption. He takes what was meant for harm and turns it into something beautiful. The very things we are most ashamed of can become powerful testimonies of his grace and forgiveness. When we understand that our past does not define us, we can begin to see ourselves through God's eyes. Redeemed, loved, and chosen. We can break free from the chains of guilt and step boldly into the future he has for us. Our value is not determined by our past failures, but by the one who created us and calls us his own. God's love is not conditional, nor does it diminish because of our mistakes. He sees our potential and the purpose he has planted within us. When we release the weight of our past, we open ourselves to receive the more that God has for us. More grace, more purpose, more freedom. Waiting is one of the most challenging experiences we face. It can feel like a stagnant, wasted period where nothing seems to change or progress. We may ask, why is God making me wait? Or is he even listening? Yet in God's eyes, waiting is not wasted time. It is a season of preparation, growth, and transformation. In our fast-paced world, waiting often feels like a punishment. We desire quick results and instant gratification, but God operates on a different timetable. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, God often works beneath the surface, cultivating something deeper in us that we may not yet see. Waiting is not a sign that God has forgotten us or that our prayers have been ignored. It is a time when God refines us, strengthens us, and molds us into the people we need to be for the blessings and responsibilities ahead. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a son, yet they had to wait many years before that promise was fulfilled. In their waiting, they experienced moments of doubt, frustration, and even attempts to take matters into their own hands. However, when the time was right, God fulfilled his promise, and Isaac was born. The waiting was not a denial, but a divine delay, ensuring that God's plan unfolded at the perfect moment. Waiting also deepens our dependence on God. It challenges us to trust him when the future is unclear and to believe in his goodness even when our circumstances suggest otherwise. When we surrender our timeline to God, we acknowledge that he is sovereign and that his plans are greater than ours. In the waiting, we learn patience, resilience, and the ability to rely on God rather than our own understanding. During these waiting seasons, we have the opportunity to prepare ourselves for what lies ahead. God may be working to develop our character, build our strength, or increase our capacity to handle the blessings he has planned. Waiting teaches us to lean into God's presence, seek his will, and find contentment in him rather than in our circumstances. If you find yourself waiting today, know that God has not abandoned you. He is still at work, even in the silence. Trust that there is purpose in your waiting, and that when the time is right, he will bring forth the promises he has for you. The waiting season may be challenging, but it is a vital part of the journey toward experiencing the more that God has for you. There is a common misconception that the desires of our hearts are selfish or unimportant to God. We might think that our personal dreams, hopes, and aspirations don't matter in the grand scheme of his plans. However, the truth is that God deeply cares about the desires he has placed within us. He knows us better than we know ourselves, our strengths, our passions, our fears, and our longings. The Bible says in Psalm 37:4, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." This verse is not simply a promise of getting what we want, it's an invitation to draw closer to God so that our desires align with his purpose. God is the author of creativity. The talents and interests we carry are not accidents. They are gifts given by him to serve a greater purpose. If you have a passion for helping others, creating art, teaching, building, or leading, know that these desires are not random. They are often indicators of the specific path God has designed for you. Sometimes we hesitate to pursue these desires, fearing that they are too ambitious, unrealistic, or even unspiritual. Yet, when our hearts are in sync with God, our desires can be powerful tools for his glory. It's essential to understand that God does not suppress our dreams. Instead, he refines them. He shapes our desires to match his will. If a door has closed on a dream, it may not be because the dream itself was wrong, but because God is redirecting us towards something better. When we trust God with our desires, we open ourselves to divine direction and greater fulfillment than we could imagine. God doesn't plant seeds of passion in our hearts only to let them wither. He nurtures them, grows them, and brings them to fruition in his timing. The dreams you hold may be part of the more that God has for you. Timing is one of the most complex aspects of our relationship with God. We live in a world that values speed and efficiency, instant results, and immediate gratification. Yet God's timing operates on a completely different scale. He sees the entire tapestry of our lives while we can only see a single thread. What may feel like a delay to us is often part of God's perfect plan. Many times we become frustrated because we expect God to answer our prayers within our desired time frame. We may assume that a delay means denial or that God is ignoring us. However, waiting is a part of God's design. He uses time to prepare us, to shape us, and to protect us from stepping into something before we are ready. Imagine receiving a blessing before you have the wisdom or strength to handle it. What was meant to bless could easily become a burden. Throughout the Bible, we see stories of people who had to wait for God's timing. Joseph had to wait over a decade for his dreams to come true after being sold into slavery. David was anointed as king as a young boy, but didn't ascend to the throne until years later, enduring hardships along the way. Even Jesus, who had all power and authority, waited for the right moment to begin his public ministry. Each of these individuals could have doubted God's timing, but their waiting became a critical part of their purpose. Trusting God's timing means surrendering control. It requires us to release our need for answers and to rest in the assurance that God knows what is best. When we try to force doors open, we may miss the divine opportunities that God has prepared for us. Just because something is delayed does not mean it is denied. The waiting process strengthens our faith, builds our patience, and deepens our relationship with God. God's timing is not meant to frustrate us, but to fulfill us. When we align ourselves with his timing, we experience the fullness of his blessings without regret or haste. If you find yourself waiting today, know that it is not wasted time. It is preparation for the more that God has for you. One of the greatest insecurities we face is the fear of inadequacy, the belief that we are not enough, or that we lack the skills, resources, or qualifications to step into what God has for us. However, God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He equips us for the work he has prepared, and he does not leave us to figure it out alone. When Moses was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he questioned his abilities, saying, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Exodus 3:11. He focused on his shortcomings, his lack of eloquence, and his past mistakes. Yet God assured Moses that his presence would be with him. God's response was not about Moses' ability, but about God's sufficiency. In the same way, God does not focus on what we lack. He focuses on what he can do through us. God equips us in various ways, through experiences, relationships, opportunities, and even through hardships. The challenges we face often serve as preparation for the greater purpose ahead. We learn resilience through trials, empathy through pain, and wisdom through failure. These experiences are not wasted. They are the very tools God uses to equip us for the next step. We may feel unprepared or unworthy, but God sees potential in us that we cannot see ourselves. He fills in the gaps, supplying us with wisdom, courage, and resources when we need them. The apostles were ordinary people, fishermen, tax collectors, and common workers, yet Jesus entrusted them with the task of spreading the gospel to the world. He didn't choose them because they were extraordinary. He chose them because he saw what they could become through his power. When we say yes to God, he equips us with everything necessary to fulfill his will. The journey may feel daunting, and there will be moments of doubt, but God's grace is sufficient. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. If God has called you to something greater, know that he will also equip you for it. The more that God has for you is not dependent on your ability. It's anchored in his strength and his provision. Many people struggle with the idea that God desires abundance for them. It's easy to believe that scarcity and lack are more humble or spiritual, but Jesus himself said in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This full life is not just about material blessings. It is a life of purpose, joy, peace, and fulfillment. It's an invitation to experience the richness of God's grace and the depth of his love. God's abundance is not limited to financial success or physical prosperity. It is holistic, touching every part of our lives. It means having a mind at peace in the midst of chaos, a heart that overflows with love, and a spirit that knows the depth of God's joy. It means experiencing relationships that are meaningful, work that has purpose, and a sense of identity that is unshakable. God desires us to live a life that reflects his nature, a God who is generous, overflowing with goodness, and rich in mercy. However, many of us struggle to believe in this abundance because we feel unworthy. We see our shortcomings, our failures, and our past mistakes, and we convince ourselves that we don't deserve God's best. We settle for less because we believe we are less. Yet God's blessings are not based on our worthiness. They are based on his grace. He does not bless us because we are perfect, but because he is good. When we embrace the truth that we are heirs to God's promises, chosen, loved, and redeemed, we can begin to live out the fullness of what he has for us. Living in abundance also means having a heart that is generous. When we understand that God's resources are limitless, we stop holding on to what we have with fear and start sharing it with others. We become vessels through which God's blessings flow. True abundance is not about accumulating more for ourselves, but about overflowing so that others can experience God's goodness through us. When we embrace this mindset, we are no longer limited by scarcity, but empowered by the abundance of God. Fear is one of the most potent forces that hold us back from experiencing the more that God has for us. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. These are barriers that paralyze us and keep us from stepping out in faith. Yet the Bible reminds us repeatedly not to fear. In 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." Fear is not from God. It is a tactic of the enemy to keep us trapped in doubt and insecurity. When we choose faith over fear, we make a conscious decision to trust in God's promises rather than in our insecurities. Faith does not mean the absence of fear. It means refusing to let fear dictate our actions. It means acknowledging that fear exists, but choosing to move forward anyway, knowing that God goes before us. The Bible is full of people who faced terrifying situations but chose faith. Esther approached the king, risking her life to save her people. Peter stepped out of the boat onto the stormy waters, trusting Jesus to hold him. David faced a giant with nothing but a sling and a stone, believing that God was greater than his enemy. Fear often disguises itself as practicality or caution, convincing us that it is better to stay where we are rather than risk the unknown. However, if we stay bound by fear, we miss out on the fullness of what God has prepared for us. God calls us to live boldly, to take risks for his kingdom, and to trust that he will be there to catch us if we fall. Every step of faith builds our confidence, deepens our trust in God, and opens doors to experiences we could never imagine. Faith over fear also means believing in God's goodness even when circumstances are uncertain. When life feels unstable, when the future is unclear, we can stand firm knowing that God's character does not change. He is faithful, he is sovereign, and he works all things for the good of those who love him. Our fear may be loud, but God's truth is louder if we choose to listen. God's love is one of the most transformative and profound realities we can ever encounter. Yet it is also one of the most difficult for us to fully grasp. We live in a world where love is often conditional, based on performance, success, or reciprocity. Because of this, we project these limitations onto God, believing that his love for us must also be earned or maintained by our efforts. However, Romans 8:38 through 39 assures us that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. God's love does not fluctuate based on our behavior or our performance. When we fail, he loves us just the same. His love is a gift freely given, not a reward to be earned. When we fully accept this truth, we can approach God without fear or shame. We no longer have to hide our flaws or pretend to be someone we are not. We can come before him as we are, trusting that his love is unchanging. This unconditional love transforms how we see ourselves and how we interact with others. When we are rooted in God's love, we no longer seek validation from people or base our worth on achievements. We become secure in our identity as his children, loved and chosen. God's love gives us the confidence to pursue the more he has for us because we know that no failure, mistake, or shortcoming can separate us from him. Believing that God has more for us requires action. Faith is not just a feeling or a thought. It is demonstrated through steps of obedience. It is easy to remain in our comfort zones, surrounded by familiarity and predictability. Yet comfort rarely leads to growth. To experience the more that God has for us, we must be willing to take risks, embrace uncertainty, and trust God's leading, even when it doesn't make sense. Stepping out in faith often feels intimidating. We may fear failure or rejection or worry about what others will think. However, every significant move of God in Scripture involved people who were willing to take bold steps of faith. Abraham left his homeland without knowing where he was going. Peter left his career as a fisherman to follow Jesus. The early disciples risked persecution to share the gospel. Each of them had to step out and believe that God had something greater for them than what they had known. When we take steps of faith, we invite God to work in ways beyond our understanding. We open ourselves to his provision, his guidance, and his supernatural power. We may not see the whole picture or understand the process, but God honors our willingness to trust him. Every step we take, no matter how small, moves us closer to the fullness of what he has for us. Faith does not guarantee a path without challenges, but it assures us of God's presence in every step. When we choose to step out and believe, we are not just trusting in what God can do, we are trusting in who he is, faithful, loving, and unfaithful. Many of us have dreams, ambitions, and expectations for our lives. We plan our paths, set goals, and work hard to achieve them. Yet God's plans for us are far greater than anything we could imagine. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 3:20 that God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. This means that even our biggest dreams and most ambitious hopes fall short of what God can accomplish in our lives. Often, our limited perspective causes us to aim for what seems realistic or attainable. We dream within the boundaries of our abilities and resources, forgetting that God is not bound by those same limitations. What we see as impossible is not a challenge for Him. When we think of our futures, we may see small, manageable steps, a better job, a comfortable home, or personal success. But God sees a tapestry woven with purpose, impact, and influence that stretches far beyond our own understanding. There are times when our plans are interrupted and we feel disappointed or disheartened. Perhaps a door closes that we thought would lead to our dream career, or a relationship we invested in falls apart. In those moments, it's easy to feel like our dreams are being stripped away, yet God may be redirecting us to something greater, a purpose that aligns more closely with His will and plan for our lives. His no is not a rejection, it's a redirection towards something better. God's plans exceed our expectations because they are rooted in His wisdom and love for us. He sees the potential within us that we may overlook. He knows the influence we can have and the impact our lives can make when we surrender to His leading. What we see as setbacks, He sees as preparation. What we view as delays, He sees as part of the divine process. When we trust that God's plan is greater than our own, we open ourselves to experiences that go beyond what we ever thought possible. It is easy to feel trapped by our past. Mistakes, regrets, and painful experiences can linger in our minds, casting a shadow over our present and future. We may struggle to forgive ourselves or believe that others can truly see us apart from our failures. Yet, one of the most freeing truths is that God does not define us by our past. In Corinthians 5:17, it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here." God sees us not as we were, but as who we can become through His grace. Many people in the Bible had pasts that seemed insurmountable. Paul was once a persecutor of Christians, yet God transformed him into one of the greatest apostles. Rahab, once known as a harlot, became part of Jesus' lineage because of her faith. David committed grave sins, yet he was called a man after God's own heart. These examples remind us that God does not define us by our mistakes. He sees us through the lens of His mercy. The enemy tries to use our past to shame us, making us feel unworthy of the more God has planned. We may believe that because of our failures, we are not qualified to receive God's blessings or to step into His calling. But God's grace is greater than our guilt. He does not disqualify us based on our past. Instead, He redeems it and uses it for His glory. Our past can become a powerful testimony of God's transformative love, a story that encourages others to see that they too can be redeemed. When we release the weight of our past and embrace the new identity God offers, we experience the freedom to walk boldly into the future. The mistakes we've made do not define us. The grace we've received does. God's love for us is not dependent on our perfection, but on His perfection. When we truly grasp that we are not defined by our past, we can embrace the abundant life He has for us. Waiting can be one of the most difficult experiences in our walk with God. When prayers seem unanswered, dreams seem delayed, and progress feels stagnant, it can be easy to believe that God has forgotten us. Yet waiting is not wasted time. It is often a season of preparation and growth. In Isaiah 40:31, we read, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Waiting is not a passive experience. It is an active time of trusting, seeking, and preparing. In the waiting, God develops our character. He builds patience, resilience, and dependence on Him. When we rush ahead, we miss the deep work He desires to do in us. Joseph waited years in prison before he became a ruler in Egypt. David waited through trials before becoming king. Even Jesus waited for the appointed time to begin his ministry. Their waiting was not wasted, it was purposeful. God was shaping them to carry the weight of their calling. The waiting season is also a time for reflection and preparation. As we wait, we draw closer to God, learning to trust him more fully. We grow in our faith, discovering that God is enough even when our desires are delayed. Waiting teaches us to release control and surrender to God's will, trusting that his timing is better than ours. Many people think that their personal desires are relevant to God, or that they should suppress their dreams to follow his will. Yet God delights in the desires he places within us. Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." This verse reflects a partnership. As we seek God, our desires begin to align with his. God's desires for us are not intended to restrict us, but to fulfill us. He knows the passions and interests he has woven into our hearts. When we trust him with our desires, he has the power to refine them, redirect them, and fulfill them in ways that surpass our understanding. If a desire remains unfulfilled, it may be that God is still preparing us for it, or that he has something even better in store. Timing can be frustrating. When it seems that God's promises are delayed, we may wonder if God has forgotten us or if we misunderstood his will. Yet God's timing is perfect, even when it feels like he is silent. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." God is never late, nor is he early. He moves precisely when the time is right. God's timing is not just about when we receive what we desire, but also about who we become in the process. Delays refine us, teaching us to trust and depend on God more deeply. They remind us that God's plans are greater than ours, and that he knows the perfect time to bring them to fruition. Trusting God's timing is an act of faith, a declaration that we believe his plans are good even when we cannot see the outcome. When we embrace God's timing, we can rest in the assurance that he is always working, even in the waiting. The waiting may be hard, but it is never wasted. God uses it to strengthen, shape, and prepare us for the more that he has planned. As we reflect on all these truths, remember that God's desire to give you more is not just about material blessings or temporary success. It is about the depth of relationship he wants to have with you, the purpose he has placed within you, and the abundant life he has prepared for you. God is not limited by your past, your circumstances, or your doubts. His plans exceed your greatest expectations. His timing is always perfect, and his love for you is unconditional and unwavering. So today, dare to believe that God has more for you. Step out in faith, trust his promises, and embrace the fullness of what he offers. Do not settle for less when God has promised so much more. Open your heart to his leading. Be willing to surrender your plans for his, and watch as he unfolds a story greater than anything you could ever imagine. God has more for you, more purpose, more joy, more peace, and more of his presence. Trust him and step into the more that he has lovingly prepared.